Good evening, everyone. I'm not sure that worked. Let me try it again. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. It's great to see you. My name is Tim Gramling. I am the Dean of the Dr. Robert K. Jabb School of Business here at CBU. We are delighted to have you here for our opening Faith and Enterprise event for 2022 in the fall. Let's give God some praise for our event tonight. I would like to open with prayer, do some acknowledgments, and welcome all of you before I transition for the beginning of our program. So let's take a moment, let's bow our heads, and let's pray. God, we are so grateful to you tonight for your love, your grace, your mercy, your kindness to us, for you allowing us to be here. We're thankful for these panelists who have come to share with us information we may not know about working in government. And Father, we pray tonight that you would give us open hearts and minds and wisdom to understand opportunities we may not always know are available to us. Please be with our speakers, our staff tonight, our students, and our entire university. Keep us safe, strong, and most of all, keep us in your will. We ask you to do it in Jesus' name. Amen. So what I'd like to do first is to acknowledge our faculty who are here with us tonight. It is always a pleasure to have our faculty join with us in these events. So we have several of our faculty here. I'd like to acknowledge them by name, of course, starting with Professor Adele Harrison. Yes, indeed. Continuing with Professor Andy Harity. And last but certainly not least, Professor Keenan Alderson. And also with us tonight and doing amazing things, I'll share our full administrative team in a moment, but an individual who has been very instrumental in making all of these events happen, the Associate Dean of the Business School, Dr. Marina Gurju. We have with us also tonight our erstwhile industry liaison and documenter of all things online, Dawn Carter. And my assistant, who really makes a lot of wonderful things happen, Dolores Washington. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. I want to acknowledge a member of our Dean's Leadership Circle, Emily Hudson, who is here with us tonight as well. Thank you so much, Emily, for coming out tonight. We are here to talk about careers in government, and this is an interesting and exciting topic. Let me say it again. We're here to talk about careers in government, and it is an interesting and exciting topic. You may not think it is, but we are determined to make it so for you tonight. I need to also share with us tonight, and also instrumental in helping our panelists come together, our Associate Director of Career Services, Laura Acosta. Come on, let's give God some praise for her tonight. Thank you so much, Laura. So what I'd like to do without any further delay is to introduce our facilitator for this evening. She is a graduate of CBU and also on the administrative staff here at the Jabb School. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Allie Ann Mayoral.
Everybody, welcome to Faith and Enterprise. We are so excited that you are here today. So we are going to be talking about what it looks like to have a career in government. And our hope and our prayer is that when you leave here tonight, that you will feel better equipped to understand what careers in government look like and also how you can integrate your faith into the workplace. Now, to get started, let's start with a Kahoot, please. So if you guys could all take out your phone. We have a game pin up on the screen. And that game pin is 35274474. I'm hearing from a few it's not working. Is it not working? Could we try refreshing the Kahoot, please? Sorry, everybody, for the technical difficulties. In the meantime, I will explain maybe a little bit more about this event. So we have asked 5 panelist speakers to come here today to talk to you guys about what it looks like to have a career in the government and also how they integrate their faith into the workplace. These 5 individuals have all worked in the government before, so we hope that the knowledge that they provide you with today will make you feel better equipped. Okay, it looks like we have a new game pin. That pin is 9591980. Oh, yay, it's working. Good, good. There we go. Thank you so much, Izzy. All right, let's do 10 more seconds. If you haven't already logged in, this is your opportunity. Okay, let's get started. Possibly. Thank you guys for bearing with us. Yeah, we have IT in the back though. Thank you guys for your help though. Oh, I'm doing that? Oh, okay then. Sorry about that. Okay, there we go. Okay, so would you consider a career working for the government? Okay, so we have 8% say absolutely not, 39% are neutral, 19% probably not, and then 22% probably yes, 11% definitely. Okay, good to know. Now our second question. What do you see as the benefits of working for the government? List out words that describe the benefits. All right, I see a lot of stability. Stability is a big one here. The pension, okay, money, stability, salary, good pension, steady income, job security. All right, so I think stability, stable income, and job security would be key ones. All right, let's move on to the next question. What is your top reason for not wanting to work for the government? Please answer in a word or a short phrase. It's the government. It's the government. Okay. Corrupt. Bureaucracy. Politics with a sad face. Oh, it's too hard, liberals. Not interested, not my thing. Slow paced. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. What is your major? Taking it a little bit away from the government now. What is your major? Okay, so we have 20% business administration, very nice, 9% with finance, 9% entrepreneurship, 9% with accounting, wow, we're pretty evened out, marketing 11%, and then 43% other. Well, welcome, thank you for coming if you chose other. Alrighty, so thank you guys so much for participating in our Kahoot. We really appreciate your feedback and kind of like sharing that with us. Now we are going to transition into a video. Now the JABS team was curious to ask CBU students to go out into our CBU community and ask other students if they would ever want to work for the government. So let's find out what these students had to say. The JAB School of Business was interested in finding out how CBU students view working for the government. So let's go find out.
All right, would you ever consider a career in government?
No.
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 I haven't.
No.
Why not?
Because I was taught to never talk about politics.
Because I have a more creative mind and I don't think I would enjoy the work.
I don't really know a lot about like what a career in government would be, I guess. Like a lot of information about it.
I don't have like the personality to be in government. Like I'm not strong-willed.
What would change my mind? If politics weren't as divisive.
If I wanted more job stability, job security, and better benefits.
And would anything change your mind?
No.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
I just personally have to stress with that. But
Okay. Maybe you should.
yeah, I would.
You would? Yeah. Okay. Grace?
Yeah, depending on what it is, sure.
Okay.
If I get to like use the gavel thing and just be like, ha!
Yes. Really? What would you
Maybe software, cybersecurity.
doing anything with like supervisors of like Riverside or whatever, doing something that is honestly you can see change happening.
Okay, what is your major?
Liberal studies.
Okay, thank you.
Major is careers.
Mechanical engineering. Psychology.
I'm communications.
Communications is awesome teachers.
I want to education. Art ed.
Computer science.
Mechanical engineering.
Graphic design.
Alrighty, now if you would all please help me welcome our panelists who will be speaking to us here today. Alrighty, so to begin with, your right, my left, this is David Carter. David has worked in the government for 24 years, and he is a federal agent. Now, following is Miles Ward. Miles has worked in the government for over a year, and he was a special projects intern, Office of Riverside, Mayor Locke Dawson. Third, we have Nathaneal Hovda. He has worked in the government for a couple of months this summer, and he was a policy intern at the White House. Fourth, we have Sandy Vazquez. She has worked in the government for 7 years, and she is part of the Riverside Councilmember Assistant. And then finally, we have Cindy Moser. She has worked in the government for 18 years, and she's the Director of Finance in the City of San Bernardino. Okay, so we have asked these 5 panelists to come and speak to you today. We have several questions that I will be asking them. However, we also have a QR code that is going to be up on the screen. This QR code is going to stay up here for the remaining of the time that these speakers are up here. Throughout their conversation and discussion, we ask that at some point you guys would scan this QR code. If you can think of some question that you might want to have me ask the panelists, please scan that QR code at any point, and then you can submit your question, and I will read it off at the end of the discussion. So, now we're going to begin with several questions, and we will have each panelist have the opportunity to respond. Panelists, we ask that you guys limit your responses to approximately 2 minutes. Okay, so the very first question to start us off, what was your impression of working for the government when you were 20?
Well, when I was 20, I probably didn't have much of an understanding of what the government was. You know, I was familiar with the DMV and probably thought everyone who worked for the government was kind of that caliber. And it wasn't until much later when I actually accidentally began working for the federal government that I realized I was working with some really, really smart and extremely motivated, extremely capable people. And hopefully I'm one of those by now.
I guess when I was 20 was 2 years ago. So working for the government, I was actually vying for that. So I was a part of a campaign for Mayor Patricia Lock-Dawson now, who thankfully won the campaign. And it was really interesting because I wanted to get an internship opportunity with the mayor's office because my friend here, Nathaneal, had worked with Mayor Bailey, and he kind of inspired me to maybe get involved. And I hadn't had an internship yet, and so I thought it was a good way to kind of get my foot in the door. And so I volunteered on the campaign. I did some marketing work for her and some video advertisements, things like that. And so I was kind of hopeful, and I was really excited on election night, and the mayor-elect then kind of offered me the position there on the spot, and so I was kind of happy to get in there. And I've been a politics nerd since I was 8 years old, so yeah, so that's just how it is.
Yeah, similar to Miles. 20 was like 2 years ago. So it's probably a similar sentiment that I have currently. I was interested kind of in government. I just like saw it on the news, like, oh, like there's so-and-so making a speech about whatever, or like changing policy on taxes or things like that. So I like knew this was happening, and I was just kind of interested in being a part of that mechanism to create change, hopefully for the better. So that's kind of the motivation, what I thought of. I mean, government can be good or bad depending on who's in it. So.
Okay, so at 20, which was not 2 years ago, so I had just moved into the city of Riverside, and I knew a little bit about government, and all I knew is that the government was able to get community together and just be able to host a lot of programs and events for the betterment, and so that was what I wanted to do. And so at that time, I also started volunteering, at that time at the public library, and then got to meet my police service representative with the Riverside Police Department, and she kind of started connecting me with the key players in the city. And from there, I just grew a passion in serving. I also worked in a few political campaigns. And then even when I was a student, I would do some volunteer work here and there. And that's really how I got my interest in government. And looking back now here, 7 years later, I've been fortunate enough to work for 3 different council members and being able to serve for the community.
So 20 was also more than 2 years ago for me. When I was 20, so I was in college, I was an accounting major. You know, my dad worked for the city. He worked for the library. It turns out my first job was actually with the government. I was a library page. I shelved books. That's all library pages do. And I was like I said, I was an accounting major. You really were like, oh, I want to go work for one of the big 8. It was big 8 at the time. Now it's like Final 4 or whatever's left. And so that was like the big glamour and like excitement. And I did end up going to work for a local firm. And turns out, what did we audit? The government. And so that was my introduction really to seeing the government more than just like Washington, D.C. and politics and all the things. And when I started doing the auditing, it was really just very eye-opening, and primarily did school districts and community college districts. But just being in that role and dealt with the finance people, and sometimes outside of finance, but mostly finance, but kind of starting to see like, wow, this is a really viable option, and people are successful, and people are happy, and people do like really great things here. And so I think that was kind of my first indication, like, oh, okay. And it helped auditing the government. I was very familiar with their processes, with all their things. And so When I left public accounting, that's what I did. I went to work for the city of Rancho Cucamonga, actually, in their finance department. And so that's what started my career in government. So ever since then, I've been in government, and I have just slowly worked my way up.
Thank you guys so much for sharing, especially after having all the students go around and interview other students here at CBU. I feel like a lot of the students have this perception that government is just politics, but that certainly is not the case. So thank you guys for sharing your story of how you got into working for the government. Now, our next question, how did you find your job in the government? How were you skeptical at first? And then how did that change over time?
I found my job at, I think, a job fair. I mean, we're talking a long time ago, 24 years ago. But I'm pretty sure it was a job fair. And I know I filled out the application, promptly forgot about it, pursued other opportunities, and then I got a call one day to come in for an interview. The other thing I would point out, so I was skeptical because I thought everyone was like people at the DMV, right? And so then I started meeting people, and as I'm interviewing, I'm like, wow, this guy's really impressive. Where's he from? He's from Stanford, and the boss is from Yale, and this other guy's from UCLA, and I'm like, I'm from Biola, So I'm like, I don't think I really measure up here, but they were really interested in me, and what was the other? That was like a three-part question.
Yeah, so how were you skeptical at first for working for the government, if you were skeptical, and then how did that change over the course of time?
Yeah, and then as I began working with people in the government, what I found was that we intersected with human lives and the human story at a very visceral level. I started as a United States probation officer, and my focus was on sentencing. So people who've either been convicted or pled guilty to a crime came to me. I did an investigation and ultimately recommended what their sentence should be. And I remember that first time my boss was like, so what sentence should this guy get? And I'm like, I don't know. Am I qualified to answer this? And he's like, the judge is expecting you to recommend a specific sentence for this guy. And I'm like, 3 years in prison? And he's like, perfect. But there was actually analysis in that. We ended up becoming experts in the U.S. sentencing guidelines, which are a massive document. And really our job was to guide the judge through that document, which they were not necessarily an expert in, so an appropriate sentence could be rendered that was unique to that individual. Everyone has their own story. Some people were overcoming addictions. Other people were overcoming of mental health issues, and we needed to craft a sentence that would be effective for that person as well as represent the interests of society. So gradually over time, as I did the job, I became more and more enamored with my ability to influence kind of the human story of each of these individuals I was working with.
And for me, as I said, I was able to get involved through the campaign that I was in, but at first, getting involved with that campaign came after rejections from internships. So I was my back was against the wall. And so I was just kind of trying to find any kind of way to get some good experience. And luckily, as I said, the mayor was able to win. And so getting involved, I don't know if I was too skeptical at first. I was kind of just, putting my feet in there, putting my feet into the deep water, seeing where it would take me. And through that, I really loved the experience. The team at the mayor's office was a team that I really bonded with pretty quickly, and I had known them throughout the campaign as well, so there was a level of trust there, and we knew kind of our working styles, we knew our personalities, and so it was really cool to be able to work with some of the colleagues, and we collaborate very closely on things, whether it's writing articles for the mayor, talking points, working on different programs that are going to be beneficial to the city. And I really liked the go-get-it attitude that the team at the mayor's office represented. It was completely different than these kinds of perceptions that people have about the government, that, these people are just in it for themselves, or, they're, corrupt or something. But I really found them to be very genuine people, and the mayor included. And I know I might sound like one of those people who comes from the government, trying to talk up their colleagues, but seriously, everybody there was really passionate about their work, passionate about solving the issues that are pressing at hand, and that's something that inspired me, and it's why I continued working there for in my short life a long time. So yeah, that was my impression.
I think for me, kind of similar to Miles and David, I just kind of applied, in this case, on a whim. So, the White House has like applications online, and so I just sent in an application, and I got an interview, and I guess, got well enough in that and got accepted. So that was after several experiences, both at the mayor's office and then the U.S. Senate, where I kind of like showed expertise in certain areas, coming from like an engineering background and being interested in policy. So that was kind of the lead up to it. And then once I got there, I was really very surprised in some senses about how motivated the people at the White House, like working on sustainability, were. Many of them had left very lucrative careers in big law firms and working in industry and being like CEOs of organizations, and so they had taken pay cuts to work on these issues because they cared about them. And so I think that speaks a lot to the drive that some people have. Not everyone has the same motivation, but a lot of people, work in that because they see change as something that they can affect, and that was super inspiring for my experience.
Yeah, so similar to Miles, the way that I was able to land the current position I was in, I was volunteering for a campaign for a council member at that time. And so here in the city of Riverside, there's 7 different council members, and each council member has their assigned field representative. We're called field directors, field representatives, aide, and basically what they are is they are the full-time staffer to the council member who oversees it every day, is a project manager, researches policy matters, just about everything you can think of. We're responsible for putting that for the council member. So at that time, in that campaign that I was working for, so the gentleman, he won the election, was elected to the council, and so he approached me and said, hey, I need a field representative. In these few months that we've been able to campaign together, I see your passion for community, and I think you should put in for it. And so I did. There was a few of us that interviewed for that position, but of course I think what helped was the fact that during the campaign, we really got to know each other, and we were able to see that a lot of the vision that he had for the community, it was a shared vision. We were very passionate about a unified community. We were passionate about serving the youth, just passionate about bringing new programs. And so it worked very well. And I was lucky enough to work with him for the 2 years. And in those 2 years, we were able to implement a lot of programs, and we were able to learn together. And I wouldn't say I was skeptical about it, but I was afraid. I was the youngest field rep at that time. And what helped was we were both so new to this, so we were both learning together. And I've always been fortunate that throughout all the council members that I've worked for, they've allowed me the opportunity to sit at the table. And that's very impactful. When you're in meetings with directors of departments, when you're in regional meetings with other electeds, it's very impactful because not only do you learn a little bit more about the processes, the program, the intention, you grow as a person. And, I know there's been comments said, even in the poll, people think that, the government is corrupt and, this, that, or that, whatever you think of it. The reality is we're all passionate. And what many people don't share is there's lots of long hours, 12, 13, 14-hour days, council meetings that go on till 1 in the morning. And it's because we enjoy it and because we genuinely care for the community that we're there. Otherwise, we wouldn't. And that's been my experience working for local government and just kind of how I got here.
Yeah, I would say I was not skeptical going into government because I had been in a job where I had basically been able to see the processes of the government, piece of the government that I wanted to go into finance. So I was actually very purposeful in looking for a job in government. But I will say, so I wasn't skeptical, and when I landed in government, I was like, okay, this is pretty much what I expected. But as I progressed throughout my career and kind of starting to realize, it sounds silly, but like how government works, kind of realizing, hey, there's a council, hey, there's like all this stuff that makes things happen. You, like all the different departments you have to deal with, all the different things you have to do. As I had moved up and kind of landed, I was with 2 cities prior to going to a community services district, which they do water and sewer, and this particular district did parks, had a parks department. And I was in a higher manager level there, and what was interesting, this is kind of where I grew up too, but starting to kind of really realize like how water impacts your community, how sewer services impact your community. There we had a parks department. The community loved the parks department. But then also dealing with a board, an elected board, seeing what their motivation was. And like Sarah was saying, they're not all corrupt. We had one woman who she seemed a little kooky at times, but she really, really deeply cared so much about water in this area. And it was really nice to be a part of that and be a part of that community. Even though I didn't live in that community, I learned a lot there, and just kind of, again, how local government impacted both of those, we'd served 2 cities. Impacted those communities. And then as I have moved along in my career and now am a director, I do realize like I'm more purposeful in what I look for in the government, because I want to be a part of a community that matters, that cares, that's going to do some good. And so I think it's just kind of growing up and really embracing just that government structure and everything about it, and like everybody has said, being a part of that community, even if it's not the community you live in.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing. So our event's called Faith and Enterprise. You guys have been speaking about government. Now we're interested in hearing, how have you exercised your faith in your government job? So to begin with, could we start with Miles, please? Thank you.
Yeah, so using my faith, I've been a Christian since I was like 5 years old, and so I don't have this, crazy testimony or anything. And so going into government, I knew that there were going to be people who were, had a different belief than I have, who had different religious beliefs, different philosophical beliefs, and so going in there, I just wanted to try to lead by example, just showing them who I am as a person, not trying to be somebody who is completely different. And I would say that a lot of people who know me know that I'm, kind of the same around every kind of group of people that I'm with. And that was the same with going into the mayor's office. I just tried to be very transparent about where I was coming from. If there were meetings that were going on about connecting with different faith groups in Riverside, because there's a lot of faith partnerships that go on with the city to do community service or to help with homeless solutions. And so, I would give my perspective as somebody who currently right now goes to the Grove. I would say, this is what the Grove is doing, or I would, give perspective on how the Grove Community Church has helped with homelessness and building affordable housing on their campus or things like that. And so I try to connect those 2 different things, and everybody at the mayor's office knows where I come from. And even when I interned in Congress as well, I just try to just lead by example there. It's much more of a cutthroat community there in Congress, to say the least. And so when I was in Washington, D.C., I felt that was very important as well, to really be kind of transparent about where I was coming from, and the kind of conversations that I was engaging in or not engaging in. And so just kind of reading the room and trying to see where everybody is coming from, and just to really understand people as well. I think that that a part of your faith is to not castigate people. And so something that I was doing was just being very, very open to people, understanding where they were coming from, their stories, their perspective, and then I think that goes a long way when it comes to your faith.
Thank you for that, Miles. I have a similar viewpoint, and when I was in DC, obviously, like, you get asked naturally as people are curious, like, oh, what school do you go to? And so when I said California Baptist, the first reaction was, one, where's that? And two, are you like a Christian or are you a Baptist? And so the first answer was, oh, it's in Riverside, California, and it's a great school. Second is yes. And so I think like in practical terms, that's often how things come up. They just come up naturally. Like people won't ask you outright, like, oh, are you a Christian? Or, oh, do you have like certain beliefs? It just comes up in conversation. And I think the important thing there is if you say, yes, I'm a Christian, which I did because I am, like them actually being able to like substantiate that. Like if they say, oh, like, really? I wouldn't have ever thought that. Then there would be a problem, right? And especially in an administration where some of the political beliefs and personal ideologies are and sometimes contrasting to my own, it was important to like be upfront and say like I didn't work on any like controversial like anti-religious issues. I just thought that it was important to always like let people know if they ask me and dialogue with them like, oh yeah, I go to church back home and I found a church in DC. And so establishing that community and just like living by example, as Miles said, for your faith is super important.
Thank you. Yeah, so how do I exercise my faith at work? So, working in government, we're supposed to separate, the church and the state. But oftentimes, a lot of constituents, when they call, and sometimes it's typically when they're like at their breaking point and they're like yelling at me, they'll ask me, are you a person of faith? And of course I say yes. And then, they'll explain why something is very passionate to them. And so for me to be able to exercise my faith, of course, it's something that's personal to me. Every time you're having one of those rough days, you send a little prayer and you just like hope that everything's going to work out okay. But even beyond that is like some of my colleagues have said, it's just being compassionate and also understanding that everybody has different beliefs, but regardless of the belief, it's always good that they have faith in someone, their God, whatever religion they practice, being compassionate about that. And also for me, just being a servant leader, being a good leader to the community and being of service, because that is primarily what we do. We're being of service to our community and just being mindful and respectful of everybody's differences and just working together to understand and just come to a common ground and be able to solve their issue that they're having and just move forward as a community.
I would say I probably echo Miles and in just leading by example. I think, I think government or actually any organization that you're in, if it's not a Christian-based organization, faith is difficult to discuss or be open with in terms of, just talking about it. So I think, just in casual conversation, I would mention I go to church, and people just kind of let that lie where it lies. And, a lot of times I would have other coworkers approach me and be like, oh, I go to church too. And I'd be like, okay, great. And so you kind of you kind of have that bond, and you can have really great conversations with those people. And you do find that in a lot of organizations, there's a lot more Christians working there than you probably think or know. I have had an opportunity. I had a gentleman that worked for me. He was having a really hard time. He was having a pretty bad family crisis, and we had never really discussed faith. He knew I was a Christian, but I did at some point say like, hey, my church offers a support group for these types of things, and I'm just letting you know, like, this is something that's available. You don't have to convert to Christianity. You don't have to do any of those things, but this may be a good way to support you and your family in this time of need. I don't know if he never took me up on it in terms of asking me, but I just felt like, at least he knows it's there. He understands that there is a faith community out there that can help in any time, and he doesn't have to necessarily be a Christian. He can just be comfortable in that setting. So I would say, yeah, definitely just like leading by example, and then not shying away from discussing faith if it comes up, if that opportunity presents itself when you're at work.
It's hard to follow what everyone else is saying. These are some great answers. For me in law enforcement, of course, I want to be a person of faith in my personal life, but I also have the opportunity to intervene at some of the worst possible times for some other people. And so I have, on the one hand, I have victims of crimes that, for them, this is a highly traumatic event. And I remember one of my victims testified at trial, and she came out of the courtroom and came running over and almost tackled me in a hug, in tears. And she's like, "This is part of my healing. I needed to confront this guy who did this to me." And so being able to, I guess, be an advocate, be someone who stands up for the victim, for me personally, is incredibly gratifying, and it's intertwined with my faith. There's also another aspect, and maybe it's a bit harder for me personally to wrap my head around, but the reality is what happened on the cross paid for the sins of the perpetrators as well. And there is an aspect of repentance and so forth, and of course not turning this into a Bible lesson, but that person who harmed others is made in the image of God and is not beyond redemption. And it's important for me as perhaps the earthly authority figure imposing or acting on behalf of the government to keep that in mind as I'm interacting with them. It'd be easy to view them as less than human, and sometimes based on their conduct that might be appropriate, but as a person of faith, I have to look at them through the eyes of Christ and look at them and see this is someone that Christ died for. And his sin, her sin, is no greater than my sin. And yes, there are earthly consequences, but there is the potential for redemption. And so for me, that's how I apply my faith at work.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much for sharing how you have integrated your faith into the workforce. It definitely causes us to be vulnerable to do so, and it's encouraging to hear your guys' stories. Now, the next question that I have for you would be, what positions exist in the government that use business skills which students may not have thought of? Nathaneal.
So I came into my role as an intern in a technical role, to be honest. It was doing sustainability and climate policy. And I came in as an engineer, and many of the people in the group I was with were either engineers or lawyers, to be honest. But oftentimes you saw this theme of people who were multidisciplinary. So not only was this person an engineer, but they had an MBA, or not only was this person a lawyer and had worked in the DOJ for 20 years, but they also had an MBA, or they had tons of business experience, like executing on policies and budgetary items throughout their tenure in government. And so that's a real practical sense, having those business skills and that acumen is very important. And so as an engineering major, I felt a little bit lackluster in some of my business and accounting abilities. So it was great to learn from some really good experts and people who were just willing to teach me how to, do accounting or policy budgetary analysis. And I think generally across government, there's tons of applications for business. You honestly are always working on different policies and procedures that go to some bottom line somewhere. And so if you have a good understanding of how money works and how finance works, then it will definitely be a strong point in helping your advancement, either if it means having a business background or taking classes on the side to learn up on different business points. I mean, I think I saw the number was 40% of the people here are non-business related majors. So it's definitely important to be able to integrate that with your own career and be aware of the different things that you would need to learn from business principles.
Yeah, so having a background in business, for example, working for the city of Riverside, we have our economic development department, whose primarily the goal is just to make sure that the city grows and we're able to attract not only businesses but the community members for people to stay here. And so having a background in business is important for that, because naturally we all want to attract the better businesses to our city, because that means we'll have more revenue, and having more revenue means we get to invest more into our community. So having a background in business certainly would apply, not just in economic development, but similar to what Nathaneal said, as a city, when they work on different policy matters, it's always good to have a variety of perspectives, not just the implementation of things, but how it could affect the business community. Anytime we think about raising taxes or implementing new fees, we always need our business community to chime in and to provide a different understanding to why this is a good idea, or perhaps why it's a bad idea. So it's something that can be applied really universally to some degree. I know that there's a lot of field representatives who also have a background in business, because part of what we do is we also get to interact with them. We get to interact with a lot of developers and get to work with them and navigate through the process of getting themselves established in the city. So there's certainly lots of opportunities for those who have a business background and are wishing to get into local government.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the business administration arena. If you think about it, like most cities or even just local governments kind of operate as a tiny business, right? So we have the necessity for a lot of those functions. Finance is a pretty obvious one, finance and accounting, but you think about IT. So IT is a huge part of the organization, and then you have HR. Even marketing. So marketing, we may not market, but most agencies have like a public information officer or an office that's dedicated to that. Marketing is a great tool that can help you move in towards that. There's a lot of different disciplines that the government will utilize that you really wouldn't necessarily think of. Like I said, each agency functions as a small business, so you really start looking at those different functions. There's also, like Nathaneal was saying, that multidisciplinary thing. So a lot of times agencies have like management analysts or different positions like that kind of require a more broad knowledge and a more broad knowledge base. And I think business administration lends itself to that. So you see people and they will maybe be in an area where they're working on special projects or utilizing special skills that they have to help just facilitate whatever that department needs. So there's a lot of broad areas within the government that need those that need business administration majors.
Yeah. Any business analytics students in the house? Yeah, it's a smart move. Don't raise your hand if you are. Bureaucrats are smart, savvy people. They don't like to make any decisions without cover. They want something to back it up, and analytics is becoming a bigger and bigger part of the government as I'm experiencing it. I think that can be really good. It can also just be kind of a waste of time too. So obviously I'm not a business analytics guy myself, but I do value what they bring to the table, and if it's used appropriately, it's really valuable. The government's just a giant business, so marketing, sales, they're not going to call it sales, but it's going to be sales. They may be talking to members of Congress, whatever, trying to get their budget, and certainly finance and accounting. In my job, I work a lot with accountants, and I think we're going to talk about that in a minute, but those are all opportunities to use your business degree in the government. For the 43% who aren't business students here, really two critical skills are needed in the government. One is the ability to critically think, and the other is to communicate, generally in writing. So if you can write and you can critically think, I don't care what your major is. You could be a Spanish major. In fact, that's actually a great combination. A Spanish major who can critically think and write is extremely valuable. So don't think that because you're not a business major that your skills aren't going to be useful.
Alrighty, thank you guys so much for sharing. The next question, how do federal investigations rely on accounting skills and following the money? Sandy.
Okay, so obviously I have an accounting background, And I mean, through audit, which is what I did for a long time, you need good accounting skills. You have to have a really good understanding of how money flows through an organization. So that means understanding all the income statement, balance sheet, all the things, financial statements, things like that, but just and also understanding processes. So the auditing, when I audited, it really did teach me to see organizations and see their finance department in a big picture. You followed money from, we call it from rec to check. So when the money got requested to when the money got paid, right? And as an auditor, you went in and you asked people questions, you talked to them. It's not just looking at balance sheets and income statements and staring at numbers. A lot of it is communication. You have to talk to the people doing these jobs and say, hey, what do you do? How does that work? Well, tell me again how this all goes. And then as you have a background in accounting and understand how money should go or should flow, that's how agencies, federal agencies, come in and they say, "Ooh, this doesn't look right," or "This isn't what's supposed to be going on." And the money does not lie, so it's easy to follow. It's easy to trace it where it needs to be. But having the accounting degree, having those skills, definitely gave me the tools to be able to do that. And then, like I said, with the auditing and seeing everything from a big picture, big perspective, I think that was really instrumental in just, again, understanding processes, understanding internal controls in agencies and different areas.
This is accounting. I lost it.
Yes, yeah. I can restate the question. So, how do federal investigations rely on accounting skills in following the money?
Okay, so I did 18 years in an inspector general's office. Half of the inspector general is auditors. The other half are agents who investigate crimes. And so the auditors are out checking out the finances of their parent agency. So, if you're a Department of Defense inspector general auditor, you're going to be out at military bases and so on, making sure that the money is being spent the way that it was allocated by Congress. On the investigation side of the shop, which is what I worked in, we had forensic auditors. And their expertise was essentially identifying the anomalies. If you're a good criminal, you make everything look like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And so it became challenging, but we would find indications that that money was being moved through various accounts, is being moved offshore and then coming back onshore. It's being moved through names that we knew were fraudulent. And then we would eventually, through the forensic accountant, track it down to the individual who was committing the crimes and ultimately hold them accountable for it.
Would you like me to re-ask the question?
Oh, is it about accounting
It
investigation?
is.
I don't think I have.
No worries, no worries at all.
I didn't go for the business part, so I'll just share with that.
Okay.
Sorry. So I just wanted to mention, because I think it's important. I know Sandy was talking about economic development for people getting involved in government who have a background in business. That is very important, and you get a chance to work with a lot of different people when you're in that position. You get to understand a lot of different business processes, a lot of different things like licensing and a whole variety of things. And there's also companies that use their technologies, like with the city of Riverside, for example, Esri. I know that they were at the career fair. They do this GIS mapping technology, and the city of Riverside and a lot of local and I don't know if the federal government does it, but I know Riverside and a lot of local governments use that mapping technology to help solve some of the issues that are, presenting itself in the community, like homelessness. Knowing what the point in time count is for homelessness, GIS helps with a lot of that. And so there's just a lot of very interesting things that you can do in government. I know Cindy was talking about marketing as well. You can use a lot of your marketing degree to help with communications, and that's something that I did as a marketing major. And I think that working at the mayor's office, a lot of it was based off of marketing, because the mayor has kind of a ceremonial role in Riverside, and so a lot of it is kind of presenting who she is and what the mayor is doing, what projects she's working on, and so helping that communications effort, helping constituents know what the office is advocating for, what kind of bills we're seeking to advocate for to solve like homelessness challenges, to get businesses to move into Riverside, things like that. And something that I've done in my role was working on this project called Campus Riverside with some of the interns that are here actually right now from the mayor's office. And working on that has been really instrumental in helping me gain like some good business acumen, as Nathaneal was alluding to, and working with a website developer, getting project management skills, contacting local businesses to see how, if they would be interested in, providing incentives for college students, and I can go on and on about that. But so yeah, it's been really cool to come from a business background, and I don't think anybody should feel that that they're unqualified to do that, because a lot of people in government come from a lot of different backgrounds, as the panelists were alluding to. So.
Thank you, Miles. And then Nathaneal and Sandy Vazquez, would you guys like to answer the question, or would you like me to move on?
I can briefly touch on it. So I didn't work too much with accounting, but as you can imagine, money is pretty important in the federal budget process. So on a specific policy that I was helping develop this spring, my director told me that when this is going through review process, the first thing you're asking is, what effect is this going to have on like sustainability? Second question is, how much is it going to cost? And the third question is, where is the money coming from? So, 2/3 of the questions are about money. And so if you don't have an understanding of like the budgetary process, it's probably not going to get much traction. So thankfully we have the White House has a pretty strong team of budgetary people with PhDs in economics and tons of research doing really crazy financial stuff, way over my head. But we would kind of roll up different policies and say, like, these are the things we're implementing across the specific initiative, and here are our initial estimates about, like a high or low kind of ballpark range. Can you give us kind of a more in-depth look at how much this is going to cost? And they would say yes, because they are accountable to the president for how much his budget costs. So they would kind of work with that policy. It's called the Office of Management and Budget, and they roll up those numbers to a final value, and that gets transmitted at the federal level. So tons of opportunity to work in that sector. It's just not in my wheelhouse to work too much with money. So
I'll touch on it briefly as well, though I don't directly get involved in terms of accounting. I mean, we do have a budget of our own that we have to manage, but in terms of federal investigations, I think the perspective I would offer is, as a city, we do receive different grants from different entities. One of the grants that we receive on an annual basis are what we call Community Development Block Grants, CDBG for short. And so basically, these grants are issued to cities, and this funding primarily goes to some of our lower income regions within the city. And with that money, of course, it comes the need for proper accounting so that we're able to follow the dollars. What did the money get used for? What projects got funded through this? Because this funding is very specific to certain locations. Not only do we have to be very intentional as a city as to where these funds go, but there has to be a community component to it. And by that I mean there has to be public hearings on this matter. There has to be community engagement by having evening community meetings where it's not just the city arbitrarily saying this money is going to fund this new swing set at a park, or this funding is going to pave a stretch of street. No, it has to come from the community. And so with that, not only do accountants and our finance department have to follow that money, but there has to be a plan in place that needs to be presented and approved by the council. But of course, that plan is made possible through community engagement. And so in situations like this, and this is just one grant out of many that cities receive, but this is where accounting is very critical. And our departments that get to interact with that, including our finance, they have to be good about being able to provide, the information and all of the background that went into it, when this gets reported back. So that would be my perspective on, on grants and money.
Thank you so much for sharing. We greatly appreciate it. Now we're going to move towards the student questions. So just as a friendly reminder, we have a QR code up on the screens. If you have a question that you would like for me to ask the panelists, or as they were speaking, it prompted you to think of something that you want me to ask them, please feel free to scan the QR code now, and I will begin with one of our questions. So this is kind of like a three-part question. So if you need me to repeat anything, feel free to let me know. So, do you think that the perception of corruption in the government is a result of people's thoughts on the federal government? Do you think that corruption generally grows as leaders become more powerful? Or does corruption make it more possible for leaders to attain a higher office?
Well, I'll go ahead and start on that one. Unfortunately, I have dealt with corruption. I spent 18 years with HUD, Office of Inspector General, who distributes block grants, as Sandy was talking about. And we've actually worked cases prosecuting city officials, county officials who are basically treating that like a slush fund. I think we have accounting majors in here, correct? Yes? Okay, great. So we know about internal controls, right? And that's where it really becomes critical. If we have adequate internal controls, we limit the ability of people to steal the money. Part of internal controls, of course, as well, is documenting where the money went and who touched it and what it was used for and so on. So all that boring stuff that the government does where they're collecting information and documenting, that's actually really, really critical, because otherwise we don't know what's happening to that money. We know Congress allocated a bunch of it and it disappeared. And so we're seeing, when I think of corruption as well, I'm thinking of employees or elected officials committing crimes. And it's probably a lot less than people using government money to commit crimes. One of the unfortunate examples is when the pandemic hit, the Small Business Administration issued PPP loans, the Paycheck Protection Plan loans, or money, actually. And that program is unfortunately riddled with fraud, not necessarily by employees, but by people who basically lied in order to get their hands on the money. And subsequently, agents have been working nonstop prosecuting those crimes. So that's one piece of it. The other piece, in terms of internal investigations, every inspector general, every cabinet agency has an inspector general, and they are charged with investigating public corruption within that agency. And usually when a federal employee, particularly a high-level federal employee, is prosecuted for corruption, that's going to be front-page news. And part of the challenge with that is that's one employee out of how many thousands, but it's the one that's making the news, and it's giving the impression that perhaps there's a whole lot more corruption there. So we take that very seriously, and we work very aggressively to root out dirty employees, and I'm actually seeing a greater emphasis now on screening employees before they are ever hired. Polygraphs and background investigations are becoming more and more comprehensive, with the idea that perhaps if we can prevent people who have made bad choices in the past from becoming employees, then we're not going to have as much of a corruption issue.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yes, absolutely. So the first is, do you think that the perception of corruption in the government is a result of people's thoughts on the federal government? Do you think that corruption generally grows as leaders become more powerful? Or does corruption make it more possible for leaders to attain a higher office?
So I think that in terms of if it's perceived as part of the federal government. I think it's a perception that kind of trickles down from the federal government, and I think that people may view all politics as corrupt because the federal government is such a nationalized thing. It's always in the public news. And so I think that, and I've ran into people and have talked to people on the phone as an intern who think that the mayor is corrupt or who think that local city officials are corrupt. And so I think it's a pervasive thing that some people are thinking. I don't know, I can't give you the statistics on how many people think public officials and politicians are corrupt, but I know there's a sizable portion of people who do think that. In terms of if it grows over time, I think it depends. I'm somebody who's more optimistic about our politicians than other people are, and so I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's because I've worked in government before, or maybe it's because I see the value in government and how it can improve people's lives to a certain degree, or help people when they're on their on their lowest or on their bad day or something like that. But in terms of it growing over time, I see as a politician gets into their into their tenure, I think that opens up the opportunity for them to develop more experience and to use that experience to help government run more efficiently. And so I think there's pros and cons to people being in government for a long time and people not. Some people, it does get to their head, and some people, they use that as an opportunity to fulfill their interests, or they might take a lot more meetings with lobbyists or things like that. And so I think it's I think it's a duty of the public to educate themselves and to realize and to do their research on what their politician is doing, what lobbyists are visiting their office, or where their money is going to, so that they can keep track of what the politician is doing or what their local city officials are doing, so that they understand exactly what's going on. So I think it's a duty on the public, but they have to keep their representatives accountable.
I think in terms of corruption, as you move up the hierarchical pyramid of government, people try to get more creative with the ways they are corrupt in some sense. And so as you move up, you have more access, you can see more things, and you have more influence on different policies and mechanisms and people. And so the bad actors will always tend to try to find their way in those systems, which is unfortunate, but it's a reality. When I was in DC, I remember getting a call from a random number on my work phone, and it was a woman who believed, because she knew it was a White House work phone, she believed that the president was embezzling money from a special interest group, and was asking me what my thoughts were. So it's a common theme throughout government, and you see it, and there's definitely corrupt things going on that many of us are just totally unaware of. I think there was some recent reporting of hundreds of millions of dollars in corrupt trading going on at agency executive levels. So it's certainly unfortunate, but there are a lot of policy mechanisms in place that prevent you from, for instance, trading individual stocks or talking to certain interest groups that may directly impact the work you do. So, for instance, I couldn't talk or do anything with electric vehicles or electricity generation while I was there in DC. So there's different mechanisms, but there's always going to be people who abuse those and find their ways around things, unfortunately.
Yeah, in terms of corruption, I think it's also one of those things where, it becomes so public that everybody seems to think because there's a few bad actors that everybody must be that way. And we see that theme not just in government. That's something that comes with almost every profession if you think about it. But as Miles mentioned, it just becomes so nationalized that everybody seems to think that even down to the local levels that, local officials must be just like those in federal government or whatever it may be. But the reality is I too am optimistic. And one of the things about government is we're the government for the people. You are our bosses at the end of the day. And so with that means there's a lot of transparency in everything that we do. I can say that on a daily basis, we get public records requests because people want to know what we spend our money on in terms of council budgets. They want to know what that money's going for. And even outside of just, within the confinement of city government, obviously when elected officials run, they have a campaign that they need to run and they get endorsements, they get funding. A lot of people want to know, well, who gave them that money? And because so-and-so gave them that money, what does that mean? What does that mean in terms of loyalty? So I can see how people might think that, but at the same time, everything is public. There's portals online that people could research the money that comes into electoral campaigns, the money that's going out, and that goes the same with certain finance documents within the city. I mean, that's why we have our council meetings, because we have to conduct the business of the people in the public for transparency reasons. This isn't to say that it doesn't exist, and I don't know the motives of if it's one of those things when people get higher up in the chain that they think they're invincible, they could get away with it. But there are mechanisms in place, and there is a lot of transparency for those who are wanting to know kind of where the money is going.
I don't feel like I have a lot to add. I actually echo a lot of what my co-panelists have said. I think corruption in the federal government, I think a lot of it's kind of like what everybody said. It's what's reported. And because that's what sells a newspaper. You don't often hear about all the good side of the federal government. You don't often hear about the good side of most of the government. And I think at the local level, I mean, having audited different governmental agencies, being part of different governmental agencies, you don't really often see a lot of corruption. There are a lot of mechanisms in place, and to prevent those things, it's like Sarah was saying, there's a lot of things out there. In my agency, there is an anonymous fraud hotline that a number is published by our HR department, and it's completely anonymous, and we are to call if we know of any fraud or anything like that. I think this is a pretty common practice. So I think, most agencies are trying to do their best to be on the up and up and not be corrupt and actually just help the people and do good. I think as you grow higher and the more powerful, I think it just lends more opportunity for corruption. But I think that's because it's people. Like, people are running the government, people are running everything, so people have that sinful nature, and in the government or anywhere else, they're gonna take advantage of an opportunity if they're inclined to.
Thank you all, and thank you for whomever asked the question. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so I'm going to be asking two final questions. If I did not have an opportunity to ask one of your questions, our panelist is going to stick around for a bit afterwards, so feel free to come up to them at the end of this event and ask your question. So another one from a student: have you found your morals being challenged when having to make a decision?
Not at work. I've found them challenged in other ways, but I actually have found working in the federal government to be a highly moral place to work. We have very high ethical standards, and we are rigorous in applying those. And if you can't live that way, if you have to live an alternative lifestyle, you're welcome to. When I say alternative lifestyle, I mean like using drugs, committing crimes, so on. You're just not going to last in the federal government. We're going to root that out and find another place for you to live.
I think there may have been times where my morals have been challenged. I don't think I was in any position to give in to that, but I think that just by the nature of who I was associating with, by through colleagues, things like that, people who I've seen in other offices, particularly like when I was in Congress, you get kind of a different perspective of things and how people view things, and so I think just staying true to your values kind of helps you weed that out and just keep going on, as I said before, just leading by example. And so I don't think that it's really been a challenge for me. I really wear my values on my sleeve, and I think everybody knows where I'm coming from, and I make that pretty straightforward. And so it hasn't really been a challenge, I would say.
Echoing comments from Miles and David, I think I was on a team and in a group that was very principled and was very ethical in the decisions they made. And, you know, if you diverted from that, then there wouldn't really be a place for you on the team. So that's not to say that there weren't other teams in other components or departments that behave differently, but in my experience, I haven't really witnessed any overt immoral actions from public employees. You know, people are watched, you know, to some degree when you work in different levels of government, and you're tested for different drugs and other things. So, you know, there's limited opportunity to be very like flagrant in your, I guess, crimes.
Yeah, similar to what some of my co-panelists have said, I don't think I've ever been in a position where my morals have been challenged. Working in the government, there's lots of tests that you have to go through, and even just working for a public official, we always know that the people are watching our every move, whatever it may be. And luckily, I've always surrounded myself with individuals who have really good character, and even just my upbringing, my own morals and my ethics have allowed me to stay true to who I am, and really haven't been put in that situation.
Yeah, I would echo everything. I was approached once by a board member who had asked me if he wanted to like bump up my title. This was during our budget process, and I just kind of, in exchange for another position I was asking for, and I just politely declined and said, no, this position that I'm asking for is what we need for our agency. It wasn't super sensational, but it was a point where I was like, oh gosh, you know, I could say yes, and potentially this guy could help me gain a better title. And like I said, I just was like, no, I'm going to do what we're doing for the agency and move on. He never really bothered me again. It was fine. So that's probably the closest, most like sensational thing I've had happen that challenged my morals. But no, I would echo what everybody else has said. Everybody is very moral. Most people just want to do good. They want to do their job. I actually feel like I'm constantly enforcing the morals, because I'm constantly telling people, no, you can't spend money on this. No, you can't do this with money. But I think everybody is generally moral, and like I said, just wants to do a good job.
Thank you. Okay, and then our final question for the evening is, why do you all think that the students should consider a career in the government? Miles.
I think students should consider a career in government, or maybe a position in the government in some sort of capacity, because I think public service is important, and I think getting into government was a way of serving the community that I love here. And so if you're passionate about the community, if you're passionate about some of the issues that are affecting the community, if you want economic development in your city, if you want to try to solve the homeless problem, if you want to be a force for good, then I think that you should consider it. I think that it's something that is noble, as I think a gentleman in the video was saying, and I think that it's something that is valuable. It helps you get experience in a lot of different areas. It helps you meet a lot of different people. It helps set a course of where you want to go in your life, possibly. And if you really love it, then you can continue in it. For me, it's not something that I want to do long term, I would say. I want to go into business, but I think that working in government has helped me understand who I am. It helped me understand that, you know, I'm somebody who loves public service. doing that critical thinking and trying to really solve the problems that are affecting the community. And so I think it's something that's important. It's something that can be valuable. I don't think that it is something that isn't worth your time, because you can use your position, especially as students going into a governmental role or an internship, you can use that position to leverage it to get somewhere else. And I think that's something that I have taken advantage of and that I have leveraged for myself. And so if you go into government, don't think that, oh, you're just going to be stuck in this one area. You could use it to go to, great lengths in your professional career.
I think for me, government allows you to make an impact above what you normally would in a private company in many instances, and so that's an attracting quality as someone who wants to make a difference and wants to do impactful things, whether that's working in your community and helping get homeless people or unhoused people off the streets. That's a very real, tangible way to help people. You can serve as an elected official and, be a voice for your community and, provide value and get value in that sense. Or you can work in, any state or federal office, either appointed or elected, and affect change that way. So I think there's plenty of opportunities to do that. And like Miles said, you don't have to necessarily work in government for, 20 or 30 years, although that's often very rewarding because the government has rewarding benefits and they pay well, and there's lots of good incentives for having a long career, but you certainly don't have to, and that's it's a good variety to have in your career, to be able to say you worked both in government and in the private sector.
Yeah, there's lots of value in working in government, whether you start in government and decide you want to go into the private sector, or begin in the private sector and go into the public sector. There's lots of value in that. There's always room for growth working in government, not just within the own organization, but even working for other organizations. I know many colleagues who will start off at an entry-level job in one department, and then throughout their careers end up as a head or director of a different department that has completely nothing to do with what they started with, and in a different agency. And so there's always room for growth. You're always learning, and also you get to be part of change, good change, positive change. Oftentimes we hear from constituents who are upset about something, but then every time we offer them an opportunity to either be part of a commission or a board, they don't want the time for it. They don't want to make that time for it. But it's getting involved and really serving the community. It's very rewarding, and not just personally, but just being able to go down a city or whatever it may be and seeing, hey, I did that, or I played a role in this, and again, professional development. There's always opportunities for growth.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would say, there's some practical reasons for working in the government. Everybody said stability, right? There's stability. There is a decent work-life balance that comes from being in the government. When I worked for a CPA firm, I didn't have that. I worked 60, 80 hours a week. I traveled probably 4 months out of the year. I didn't like that, mostly because I wanted to have a family, right? So when I went into government, that was part of it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to have a 40-hour work week for the most part and know what I'm getting myself into in terms of working. So stability is a big portion of it. And as a lot of people have mentioned, if you stay in it, the retirement's really good. And there is so many opportunities that you just don't realize exist in the government. One of my coworkers, she's a director over environmental and regulatory compliance, which is a mouthful. Her degree's in biology, and she deals with all the regulatory compliance that goes with our sewer treatment plant. There's so many different opportunities there, and I think the biggest thing is just don't discount it. Try it. You don't have to stay in it if you don't like it. There's a lot of opportunity out there, but I think it's just don't count it out. And especially from a business perspective, and they're right, you are helping a community. Sometimes in the finance department, it doesn't necessarily feel like I'm doing a whole lot for the community, but I always have to think in terms of, hey, I am stewarding this money that's been charged to me to look after for this community, for these people. And that matters. It matters that I handle it well. It matters that I do good with it. It matters that I apply my Christian principles to it. So that's why just don't discount it. Think about it. See what opportunities are out there. Explore different local governments. It's not just cities and counties and the federal government. I've worked for a water district. There's cemetery districts. There's all kinds of different local agencies that you can look into and find a place.
Real quick, I started in the private sector and chose to go into the public sector as a government employee. And one thing I found is I have far more creativity or freedom to be creative as a government employee than I ever did in the private sector. I'm given an objective. How I get there is my choice within parameters. And in fact, I work with a team of highly competent agents. Many of us are going to solve the problem differently, based on our own strengths, based on our own backgrounds. The other thing I'd say is there are some jobs you can only do in the government. If you want to, if law enforcement appeals to you, we don't have private law enforcement in this country. If being a prosecutor appeals to you or a defense attorney, most likely you're going to at least start as doing that in the government. Definitely for prosecutors, and most defense attorneys actually start as prosecutors. If you want to work in the judicial branch, that's where I started. Again, that's only done in the government. So there may be opportunities that might intrigue you that you really are going to have to consider going to the government if you want to do those things.
Great, thank you all for sharing, and please help me in thanking the panelists for coming and speaking to us today. Okay, and before you all leave, we do have some closing remarks. As a friendly reminder, the panelist is going to be sticking around for a bit after this event, so if you did not have your question answered, please feel free to come up and ask them. Panelists, you can go back and take a seat. Thank you so much. Please help me thanking them again. And now if you would all help me in welcoming Dawn up for our closing remarks.
Oh, okay, awesome. One of the things I'd like to do, who enjoyed that video? Wasn't that just a hoot? I don't know, that was funny to me. But I want to thank some of our students that helped participate in that. I want to thank Melissa Kwan, Wiley Lloyd, raise your hand if you're in here, Sarah Lopez and Laura Smith for there. If you guys could just clap for them. And I think we discovered some hidden talent in there. So you may be seeing more of their faces for the rest of the year. But I just wanted to thank you again for coming on out. We respect your time, and we know that this was an evening off of studying or going to other events. So thank you so much. I think one of the things what makes me really, really proud is when I went to one of the job fairs, and two business students who work for NAVSEA, which is the Naval Surface Air Warfare Station in Corona, they were raving about their jobs that they had. They said, you know what, I never knew jobs like these existed. And this is working for the military, but on the civilian side of the house. It didn't mean you had to go carry a gun or anything. The Department of Defense hires almost a million people. So what I just want to encourage you all to do is I hope your eyes were open to some of the other opportunities, and I hope that you will explore some of the things that you can use your skills and your education in, maybe in areas you hadn't thought of before. So thank you again. Thank you, Alianne. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. And please, please, please do ask your questions of our panelists if you'd like to come up and have that. So have a good night. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Hello? As you guys are leaving, I forgot to mention, if you asked a question and you would like a Jabs t-shirt, we do have t-shirts for you, so please feel free to come on up and grab one.